Okay, I said I would do a Q&A video a while back, and you all sent in questions, so let's get to answering your questions. The first one being, if you were in control of Stow for a day, you can make 5 permanent changes to the game. What would they be? Honestly, that's a tough one. Honestly, because if you're gonna make 5 changes that are permanent, you at least want them to be like feasible changes. You know, I don't want to be like the guy that says, oh, I just, completely changed a bunch of giant things that are really hard to do. I'd probably just go something simple and just put in 5 ships that I like with stats that I like. Something, I'm simple like that. I just want a cool looking ship with good stats. That's really all it takes to make me happy. What is the importance of torpedoes on a beamboat for DPS and why? Well, part of it is because energy weapons are by design meant to strip away shields. They are meant to do more damage against shields, whereas torpedoes do less damage against shields, but they do a lot more damage against hull directly. So because energy weapons are so good at taking down enemy shields, then you want a torpedo to really hammer in those last few punches. I know it can seem kind of weird just because, with an energy weapon build, you spend all that time putting everything into buffing your energy weapons, and then your torpedo is just kind of there, and, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I get that, but that's how the numbers come out in the end, generally. Depending on the torpedo you're using, I mean, generally, like, something like a quantum torpedo, even just like a standard quantum torpedo, is going to do better than something like a tricobalt or a chronoton torpedo. And then there are even better torpedoes further down the line once you get like, more premium stuff like the dark matter quantum torpedo or a maelstrom torpedo. So really the answer to this question is just because math. Star Trek Online calculates damage in a variety of different ways, and it can be rather complicated to figure out. So that's kind of just what it comes down to. Oh, by the way, guys, thank you so much for all the well wishes to my mom. She is still in the hospital right now. Things are still kind of up in the air on whether or not she's going to be coming home soon or she's going to stay there longer for her physical therapy, because it's going to be easier for them to do that there. But right now it's kind of a fight to figure out what the insurance company wants to pay for. So, yeah. Healthcare in America, it's a shit show. Anyway, as for a question, what is the one ship you want to see above all others in Star Trek Online? It's got to be one. It can be your idea or from other media, but it has to be one ship that I want to see. Well, obviously, Odyssey American Worker Flight Deck Carrier. That's something I really want to see. But I assume you mean like not stats wise. You mean like an actual original ship model that isn't in Star Trek Online yet. And honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is the Shangri-La class, the ship that inspired the Constitution 3, because while I hate the Constitution 3, I actually really like the original like TMP era Shangri-La class, and I think that would be really cool to see in Star Trek Online. In fact, I did a Theorycraft video on it not that long ago, so yeah, I think that would be a really cool one to see in Star Trek Online. Is there any way to use up excess dilithium in my assets tab after refining 8,000 per day? Now, I'm assuming you're talking about dilithium ore, because I hear this a lot with people. They get frustrated when they have all this dilithium ore built up in their assets tab, and they can't do much with it because you can only refine 8,000 a day. And the truth to that is just there really isn't much you can do about that, besides just keep refining it every day. There are a couple of things you can do to increase that refinement limit. One is on the Fleet Dilithium mine. There is a duty officer project that allows you to refine another additional 500 dilithium per day. There's also another officer in Starfleet Academy, actually in all the academies, that will allow you to do 1,000 every 2 days, but that one is limited to lifetime subscribers. But even with those 2 options, it's not a huge increase, because it turns into an average of 9,000 per day as opposed to 8,000 per day. And that's assuming you do both of those duty officer assignments each day, which can be kind of tedious just because, I mean, one's on the Academy, one's on the Fleet Dilithium mine. It's a lot of loading screens to go through. Honestly, my only real suggestion with this, it would be to start playing additional characters, because that refinement limit is per character. So even though you can only do 8,000 per day on one character, you can still do an additional 8,000 on another character, as long as they have the ore that they can refine. So again, this is one of the reasons why I do encourage people to play multiple characters at once, especially if they're concerned about being able to gather dilithium. The more you spread that stuff out, the easier it is to build up a stockpile of dilithium. Is it absolutely crucial to move Stow to a new engine? No. People often bring up this argument whenever we're talking about bugs or how dated the game is. People think that moving Stow to a newer engine like Unreal is just like a catch-all to solve all of the game's problems, which is not how that works at all. Like the devs have explained multiple times that moving the game over to a new engine wouldn't really change anything. The game would still play exactly the same. It would just be doing it in a different engine. Keeping the Dyson Sphere in mind, what are your thoughts on other battle zones expanding to offer as many options as the Dyson Sphere? For example, the Zinkethi battle zone has a space battle zone. Maybe they could incorporate a ground battle zone. New Kara has a ground portion. Maybe they could create a space battle zone. See, honestly, I don't feel like that kind of stuff is necessary. You don't need to have like a space and ground counterpart to every battle zone. And I say that as someone who really enjoys battle zones. Like there are days where I will just spend a bunch of time just wandering around the Dyson ground battle zone in the Dyson Sphere, just because it's fun, turns off my brain, get to shoot a bunch of stuff, blah blah blah. But I'll also do that in the other battle zones too, like the Zinkethi or the mirror battle zones as well. But I don't feel like they need to be as big as the Dyson Sphere zone, just because that was a unique thing that was all incorporated into a bunch of other story elements too. So they really need like the excuse to make something that large. And the other thing is, I don't think they would go back and like alter the existing battle zones. More likely they would end up being new battle zones, which is something I would greatly prefer. But even then, I don't think they're going to be doing any new battle zones anytime soon, with assuming like we know Deca is hiring new people, but we don't know how big the new dev team is going to be in comparison to the old Cryptic dev team. So yeah, I don't really see a need to expand the existing battle zones, but I would love to see new ones. What do you think about a T6X3 experimental upgrade token / upgrade that would, in addition to what T6X2 adds, additional device slot, console slot, starship tray slot, it would also add the choice of one of the following: experimental weapon slot, hangar bay, or another additional forward or aft weapons slot to any ship. Could require 3 experimental upgrades to go from T6X2 to T6X3, or a new token idea, perhaps. Also, they should update old bundle. Okay, first part. I don't really agree with this setup. I don't think adding experimental weapons or hangar bays or additional weapon slots to ships is a good idea. I feel like that's just a really great way to just completely throw off what little balance there is in Star Trek Online. I feel like experimental weapon slots need to be exclusive to stay exclusive to escort ships. Hangar bays, I do agree with Spencer on this one. I do agree that hangar bays would be nice to be like a standard thing on all ships, but they're not. So unless they're going to actually just do that throughout the entire game, I think how they're doing it as they are now is just the way to keep doing it. And making a token that adds a hangar bay, I feel like is just asking for a lot of problems, and even more so with adding weapon slots. That could end up being problematic. But at the same time, I wouldn't hate it, but I feel like it's just asking for more problems than anything else. And the cost here too. I've said this before. If they're going to be doing T6X3, they need to figure out a different way to do that, because if they're just going to make it cost even more tokens, the cost of getting these things upgraded is just getting exponentially out of control, and they need to come up with a different solution before we get to that point. But in the end, honestly, the big thing I'm always more concerned with is I always want more console slots and more starship trade slots. Those are the big 2 things I always want on a ship. Also, should they update old bundles that include experimental upgrades to include enough to get them up to T6X2 or even T6X3 in the future? No, I don't think they should update those bundles, because that's going to affect the cost of those bundles. They start putting more stuff into them, they got to start raising the price on them, and then it just becomes a whole thing. Like, how do you deal with that with people who've already purchased that bundle? Do they just get a bunch of free upgrades, or do they have to pay for those extra upgrades? Then they gotta implement a system that differentiates between the two. Again, it just turns into a whole thing of it turning into a whole big pile-up thing. And honestly, really, the best way to get experimental upgrades anyway is through the Phoenix Prize event anyway. So just do it that way. What is the best ship for Tour of the Galaxy now with the newer ships? Protostar. Protostar is the fastest ship to use for Tour of the Galaxy because of its unique proto-warp ability. We all know of your love for the Odyssey class. What is your second favorite ship? Not for specs, just looks. Looks-wise, my second favorite ship, that's a tough one. Honestly, there are a lot of ships that I really like that are, kind of come close to the Odyssey for me, like the Avenger, the Exeter. I really like the Gagarin. Gagarin is probably like my second favorite. That's a big favorite for me. I really do like that ship. Honestly, like before Star Trek Online ever came out, I definitely would have said like the Galaxy class. That would have been like my old school favorite. But yeah, honestly, I've always been a very indecisive person. Like I've never been able to stick to like my one hardcore favorite for like a super long time. Like that, even before Stow, I would often go like back and forth between what my favorite ship is. What game mechanic would you change, add, or remove? Well, I wouldn't remove anything. You remove something, you always risk pissing someone off. Change. I don't know. I would love to see some updates to the R&D system, mostly just like adding more useful gear and making it just more user friendly. The lock boxes, definitely like changing that whole UI, making making the whole experience more friendly for players to actually open boxes, to make it a bit easier to get certain stuff, condensing a lot of the menus, limiting, cutting down some of the RNG factor on some things. I know Spencer's gone into a lot more detail on this. Basically, a lot of his ideas of what he said on lockboxes on how to improve those, I very much agree with what he's said on a lot of those, because you would think, lockboxes being like one of their main money makers, you would think they want to make that as friendly an experience as possible, but as it is, it's more of a pain in the ass than anything else. Yeah, that's really all I can think of. Why don't you stream a bit here and there? This is something I have been wanting to do. In fact, I used to stream all the time. I got my content creation start on Twitch, so I used to do streaming fairly regularly. Then I moved over here to YouTube, and I just kind of fell off of it. I need to get back in the habit of doing it. It's, I don't know. One day I might. I don't want to promise anything, but yeah, it's something that's been on my mind. Do you think we'll ever get to see the Behemoth class? And if we do, would it be playable by the player base or more of a destination/rescue vehicle? I have never heard of a Star Trek Behemoth class, and if I haven't heard of it, that means it's probably either one of the old FASA designs or it's a fan-made ship. And if either of those, they can't use those. They don't have like like Paramount doesn't have like all the licensing stuff to use all the FASA stuff, in however they want. So that means Star Trek Online can't use all the FASA stuff any which way they want. Additionally, fan-made ships, definitely they cannot use fan-made ships. So I wouldn't count on this. And as for like a destination/rescue vehicle, I have no idea how that would work in Stow. So like, again, I'm not familiar with this ship. Do you feel Deca will ever give console players a way to move their accounts to PC, as it is discouraging to console players to not enjoy the full game and spend double on what most of you already do? Honestly, I don't know. I don't think they can. Like, this really isn't like a decision that's left up to Deca or Cryptic. It's really down to Sony and Microsoft, because if they... The big thing there is that all Zen sales that are purchased for the console, you have to go through, PlayStation Network or Xbox Live in order to purchase those. So because they're hosted on those platforms, Sony and Microsoft get a cut of those Zen sales. You start giving console players a way to move away from console, then there goes their revenue stream. You're basically just giving them an out to not spend any money through their platform. So there's really no incentive for Sony or Microsoft to allow Cryptic or Deca to give you this option to transfer your account to PC. It might be a different thing if crossplay were a thing, but it's not, and I don't know if that could ever possibly work in Star Trek Online, given the differences between console and PC. So yeah, sadly, I don't see it happening just because Microsoft and Sony would never allow it. Are you expecting Stow content and gameplay to improve under Deca? I mean, yeah, that's kind of the goal here. As Deca takes control over Star Trek Online, they're going to be, constantly developing new content, probably, minor updates here and there. What I'm expecting is once, they get everything up and running under Deca, things will be moving pretty much at the same pace as they were under Cryptic. I don't expect any vast, game-changing changes. I expect them to just keep the ship moving as usual. The other part is, and how, in what ways do you think PvP can improve? I'm not a PvP guy. That is not a question that I am up for answering. You'd have to ask someone who is more familiar with Star Trek Alliance PvP. I generally try to, I generally avoid PvP. It's not an environment I typically enjoy in Star Trek Online. If you could add the wingman mechanic to other factions, what ships would you pick? Federation, Klingon, Romulan. I assume you mean like what would the actual like physical wingman pets be? What ships would those be? I mean, the easy answer would be Defiant, Burrell, and the Malum for each of those. But you know, given that the Jem'Hadar Vanguard ships, those aren't Jem'Hadar attack ships, so why would you go for like the basic 3 for the other 3 factions? So maybe like change things up a bit and go with like the Adamant or the Exeter for the Federation. Then maybe go for like the Moog for the Klingons, and for the Romulans, honestly, I'd probably still go with the Malum. What would you suggest to Deca if they asked as a good addition to Star Trek Online to improve the endgame experience? Honestly, I feel like a big thing that Star Trek Online really needs right now is a new specialization for ships. Something to add more variety to T6 ships as they're being released. I feel like is something that's really necessary, because we're getting to the point where we're starting to see new ships that are very similar to previously released ships, just because, you know, there are only so many bridge officer combinations you can use with the amount of specializations that they have. So I feel like adding a new specialization should be like a reasonably high priority, just for the sake of, you know, continuing the game's development. What would you want to see added to a Miracle Worker revamp? Well, the big thing with Miracle Worker is that it has no abilities that trigger unconventional systems, but it does have 2 abilities that sound like they should trigger unconventional systems. Deploy Gravitic Induction Platform and Null Pointer Flood are both control abilities, so it is weird that neither of them affect unconventional systems. I mean, Deploy Gravitic Induction Platform is a little odd because technically it's like a pet, so you could argue that it's the pet that triggers the control effect, not your ship itself. So that could be a reason why that one doesn't affect Uncon. But Null Pointer Flood, I feel like definitely should. So even just getting one additional Uncon trigger into Miracle Worker would be a really nice buff to the specialization as a whole. In the past, I've said I would love to see the actual ship mechanic buffed as well, and while I still kind of agree with that, I don't think it's super necessary, because the big thing with Miracle Worker ships is you don't really care about the ship mechanic. The big appeal to Miracle Worker ships is the extra universal console slot. That's a huge thing in comparison to other ships, so it makes sense that they would kind of want to downplay the actual innovation mechanic on Miracle Worker ships. Beyond that, some buffs to some of the lesser used bridge officer abilities in Miracle Worker, like destabilized warp core or aligned shield frequencies, stuff like that. You know, some buffs to those would be kind of nice, but beyond that, Miracle Worker's in a fairly decent state. What is your favorite non-Federation ship? The Dederadex. The classic Dederadex Warbird, that was always like a big favorite for me. Yeah, for non-Federation ships, definitely, like, it's my favorite alien ship in Star Trek. Even like not including the Dederadex, like generally if we're talking like what's my favorite non-Federation ship, it's probably going to be some kind of Romulan ship. What's your current take on the Deca takeover? Maybe I've been missing out, but there doesn't seem to be much news except we push back content. Well, you got to keep in mind that they are still training up the new Deca people, so there's not going to be a lot of news because they are still training people. Like there's not much to talk about because there's just not a lot happening right now, because, you know, they're still building up the dev team. Once that's done, though, I feel like we'll finally get back to business as usual. But right now, the only thing that's happened right now is that, yes, they did have to push back some content, but that's just because they're still focused on quality over quantity. They really want to make sure that the next story update is as good as it can be, so they don't want to rush it. And I think that's a smart move. You don't, whenever, especially in the past, whenever Cryptic has like rushed out content, it always ends up being just like a complete shit show. So I would much rather than take the time that it needs rather than just push it out as quickly as possible, especially considering the next big update is the anniversary event. They usually tend to go pretty big for the anniversary events, so I would rather them put their full focus into that than trying to just push out as much crap as possible. So I feel like, I know it's frustrating right now, but in the end, I feel like it's a smart move for now. But yeah, I do expect things to get better as time goes on, as we get closer to the anniversary event and further into 2025. If you could choose 1 or 3 Star Trek original ships to make canon, what would you choose? It's a little odd to just pick 1 and then pick 3, so I'm just not gonna pay attention to any number limitations. I would love to see the Arbiter, the Exeter, the Giorgio made canon. Let's see what else. There's a few others I would love to see made into canon. Oh, the Hapax. That's a big favorite for me for the Romulans. The Moog class I would love to see made canon. Oh, the Chimera. That's a Nog ship. I would love to see that make it into one of the shows. Oh, and the Baran. I always thought that's a really underrated ship. Is there any way to get that poster behind you aside from a time machine and ordering it from Starlog? I don't know. Like, if you're asking for like my actual poster, like that's mine. You can't have it. That was a gift from my dad. I'm not giving it away. But like, if you're actually like for a copy of it, I have no idea. Like, try eBay. My dad got this one from a collector store when I was a kid. So maybe try like your local collector's shops or maybe a flea market or something like that. What happens to my fleet credits if I change fleets? Nothing. Your fleet credits are yours. Once you've earned them, they stay in your little stockpile of fleet credits until you actually spend them. If you leave your fleet, those you still keep those. Do you have favorite ships based off of performance versus looks versus lore, well, versus any other criteria? Come on, Joe, you know I'm just gonna say the Lexington, man. But no, really, yeah, like, you know, looks and lore, you know, Odyssey and Lexington are definitely gonna be my favorites. Actual performance, I guess it depends on, like, you know, what kind of performance I'm looking for. For like energy weapons, I still really like the Theseus or the Atlantis. For torpedo builds, I mean, there's the Eagle, but I also really like the World Racer for torpedo builds. Actually, I like the World Racer for pretty much anything, honestly, because that's a really versatile ship. But yeah, it really just, I don't know, it just kind of depends on what I'm in the mood for. I mean, sometimes it's often like a combination of these factors too. Like, I really love the Premonition for its looks, but it's also, you know, a pretty decent performer for EPG. It's not the best ship in the game for EPG, but it's definitely like up there. Yeah, honestly, it's not that easy of a question to answer, just because I like the ships that I like. You know, sometimes I don't really need a reason for it. I just like them. Is there a best ground weapon for each damage type? Thinking about Endeavors. Well, if you're just thinking about Endeavors, there is actually one set of weapons that is actually perfect for those. Hold on, let me go find it. Here we go. These are the cyclic modulation weapons. These are old event gear, but they have been moved into Mud's Market since then, so you can get them through Mud's Market. You can get them unlocked on your whole account. Definitely wait for a sale. Don't buy them for 8,000 Zen. That's ridiculous. Wait for a 75% off sale if you want to pick these up. But yeah, for the sake of your endeavors, these can be a really nice convenience, because instead of having to carry around a weapon for each damage type, you can just carry around these. You can reclaim them, reclaim however many you want, because again, they're they're either event unlocks or Mud's Market unlocks, so either way you're gonna get those on your whole account. There are 3 different versions. There's a pistol, there's a sniper rifle, and an assault blast weapon. I usually like the pistol just because I like the faster firing rate. But yeah, how these work is, you know, they've got a the primary and secondary firing mode like pretty much any weapon does, but instead of a melee attack, the tertiary attack is actually this cyclic modulation ability which will change the weapon's damage type. So it'll start with phaser when you equip it or change instances, but you hit that button, it'll change over to a disruptor weapon, and then plasma, tetrion, polaron, and antiproton, and then just repeat. It's definitely not like the strongest weapon for any of these, but honestly, if you're just interested in your endeavors, you don't really need the strongest weapon. Honestly, I much prefer this just for the sake of the sheer convenience of it. But other than that, like, again, if you're just interested in getting your endeavors done, really just pick up whatever common gear you can find, upgrade it to Mark 15. Don't even worry about getting it to Epic. Just get it to Mark 15, and then just, you know, go to town whenever you need that that damage type for an endeavor. So yeah, those are my questions to your answers. Guys, don't forget, if you watched the last video, the you know, how far we've come video that I did for hitting 9,000 subs, I am still giving away codes for the Heritage Starship bundle. So if you haven't watched that video, go watch that to find out how to enter for a chance to win one of these bundles. These are all fantastic ships, so I feel like a lot of you are definitely not going to want to miss out on that if you haven't gotten these ships already. Also, PC players, there is still time to pick up the free Vulcan cybernetic bundle, outfit bundle, and the Vulcan bob hairstyle. These, based off of Rutherford and T'Lyn from Star Trek Lower Decks. These are free giveaways available in the promotions tab of the C Store. There is about 2 days left to pick these up. Probably be a little less than 2 days by the time this video is live. So yeah, if you haven't claimed these already, they are free giveaways in the promotions tab. Be sure to get them while you can. Console, you guys will be getting these at a later date, I think. I don't think these are available on console yet, but yeah, PC players, if you haven't picked these up already, it's free stuff. Pick it up. But yeah, that's where we're gonna call it here, guys. Thank you so much for watching. And just thank you so much for hanging around the channel for as long as you have. I really do appreciate it. Yeah, it's been quite the ride, and I hope we can keep going with this. I really do. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to further support the channel, hit the join button to become a member. Find the merch store link down below, or if you're ever shopping on the Epic Game Store, be sure to use my content curator code STU1701. These really help me out, and I really do appreciate it. Either way, though, thank you so much for watching. My name's Stu, and I will see you guys next time.